is move on to the hot topic of the repatriation issue of our citizens.
Yeah.
Right? We have been very outspoken on the issue. We have tried to maintain a certain level of what has happened is we have continued to do this because since the second show we had,
Yeah.
we brought up the topic and a lot of messages has been coming in.
Yeah. Our second episode, I think that we decided that we want to highlight this issue.
And we highlighted it very briefly.
And a lot of people have reached out, a lot of
Yeah.
people have spoken out, and people have asked us to continue to highlight the issue.
Yeah.
We have no difficulty
We
with
have
that,
no difficulty
and I
in
think
that.
that we will continue doing that until we bring some type of relief.
Because
to
as we continue saying, look, these citizens out there, it doesn't matter who they are, where they're from, they are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
They are our brothers and sisters, and we need to continue looking out for them.
Yeah.
And
We need to continue to call upon the government to implement systems, put policies in place to bring home our citizens as
Yeah.
fast as possible
now,
in a safe way.
I think on Zoom we have Dr. Karen Seenath. Doctor, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you.
Hi, welcome to the program, Doctor.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
We know that you have been someone who has been very outspoken on the issue. Maybe you could tell us firstly about the background, how you came to be stranded, and how long you were abroad.
Well, before I start, if you permit me 1 minute
Of
to
course.
express condolences to the family of our returning national, a senior citizen of Trinidad and Tobago who passed on the flight from JFK. I mean, one can only imagine what that son who was on that flight is feeling, and the family who was waiting in Trinidad, how they must feel at this time. So, in terms of our motivation, if I am looking for an excuse to continue my fight in getting stranded nationals back home, this certainly does it for me. So tonight, the whole of the stranded national community expressed their condolences to this family.
Yes.
Kyle,
And certainly
doctor,
we join in that sentiment. We also express our condolences here
Yeah.
in Section 1 to the family and the loved ones of that deceased
It
person.
was absolutely, I read the article last night and it's absolutely heart-wrenching to hear. I can't even put myself in a situation where the son had, I mean, there is a voice note going around, but his son was crying out for help. I mean, his dad was, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get overly
Well,
emotional.
and what's
from everything.
what's even worse is I suppose the family would have been expecting him home after so
yeah.
long, and then to be deprived of seeing him again.
After 8 months, and then you
After
have
8
him
months.
coming back home and
Absolutely.
And doctor, you no doubt would have had a lot of stories similar to this, given your outspokenness.
No, one of the things that people don't realize is accessing healthcare in the United States and the United Kingdom is very difficult. There's a
Yeah.
health insurance based policy. And if you do not have health insurance or you cannot pay out of pocket, you are not treated. So personally, I've been in contact with many elderly who stopped taking their medications, stretched it out, half the dose,
Yeah.
or even borrowed medication. So, the suffering, it's not just physical, it's mental and it's psychological. And I'd like to start, by pointing out the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, Article 13.2 states that everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and return to the country.
Yep.
Yep.
So when someone said to me, when I came in last Monday, you should be grateful that the government granted you an exemption. It wasn't a privilege for me. It was my right as a
Yes.
citizen
Correct.
to return to my country of birth.
Yes.
So, when the government closed the borders in March, it was the right thing to do because we didn't know about this virus. We had very limited information. And one of my first articles, in one of my first newspaper articles, I actually commended the Prime Minister for doing that.
Yeah.
Because I think that single act saved thousands of infections and possibly lives. However, as the time passed by and we got more and more and more information about how we should be handling this virus, we are now left with a repatriation policy, and I'm not going to mince words here, that is senseless and illogical.
Yeah, Doctor, before you go on, I just wanted to jump in right there. Now, you said that initially you thought that the closure of the borders was a good move.
Yes,
I know in speaking to some people have complained about the notice that was given. Of course, there's a distinction between closing the borders to persons who are out of our country trying to come in and closing the borders to our citizens that are trying to come in.
Yep.
Do you see a distinction there, or do you think that a proper more notice should have been given?
Well, in the initial stages, I'll be honest with you, as a physician, as a scientist, when you don't have any information about the virus, because it originated in China, there was fear, an overwhelming fear. So, I'm not going to call out any government for closing their borders at that time to everyone.
It was understandable that they went all out.
That was perfectly understandable, and people understood that. Those of us who were stranded thought, okay, yes, the Prime Minister is doing a good thing. So let's hold strain as they get more information. Of course, we expected the policy to change.
Yes, correct.
And
right?
was there a level of communication do you think that the level of communication between the government and the stranded citizens was sufficient as far as you're aware? Because it's one thing to close the border, but you have to communicate that, right?
Absolutely not. You cannot communicate or empathize with people who have been stuck out of the country for months by a generic email that says, we are reviewing the repatriation process. You just can't. Yeah. Right? In fact, some people got no acknowledgement. Some people got the same email. And also, for instance, I wrote on behalf of 30 elderly nationals, and I got the same generic email addressed to my email address.
Wow.
I was going to say you're one of the lucky ones to get an email, because from what some of the people who have reached out to us, they simply are in the dark for the longest while. They had to be the one to reach out to their consulate, to their coordinators, to ensure that there is some level of communication between them. But there simply hasn't been.
Correct. And, so with regard to international travel, the World Health Organization, since the...
Hi, doctor, you there? Sorry, you broke up for a second. You there?
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right, yeah.
Yeah, with regard... Yeah, are you hearing me?
We're hearing you, yes.
The World Health Organization, since the 30th of July, issued guidelines about international travel. It's interesting.
I think we're having some technical
difficulties. Maybe
Is Doctor still there?
Dr. Sohan? Maybe we could take a short break and try to reconnect.
Yeah, we could take a short break. Let's take a short break and we'll come back with Dr. Sohan.
Dr. Sohan.
Yes, welcome back. Unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties with Doctor. Doctor, are you there?
Yes, I'm back on.
Good.
Right.
You were saying about the protocols of the World Health.
I think my husband is terrified that I've decided to be so vocal. So he's just checking in on me.
That is
Well, that's his
absolutely
right.
fine.
Yeah, so I was talking about, the document from the World Health Organization from the 30th of July. And it's interesting that our policymakers pick out aspects of the document to suit themselves.
Yeah.
So, in fact, what the document says is that repatriation, 30th of July, has to be given priority. You may decide whether you open your borders to other international travelers, but as far as nationals are concerned, they must be given priority.
Yeah.
The document states that you must take into consideration not only the country of origin, but the country that you're traveling to. And what this means is, if we're traveling from the United States, where there is community spread, and we are coming to Trinidad and Tobago, where there is community spread, the WHO document states that there is no substantial risk of potential impact on the current epidemiological situation.
So that
It goes on,
So
it goes
yeah.
on to say that it depends also on your local policy. Well, what is our local policy? Asymptomatic COVID positive patients are allowed to home quarantine.
Yeah.
I see. So that applying the policy would really mean, if they apply the policy correctly, it would really mean that our stranded citizens should be brought home as per usual, expeditedly, in an expedited
Absolutely.
manner. Yeah.
And I'll tell you another thing. The present state quarantine, is a waste of resources.
Why do you say that?
Because I observed you have to provide 3 meals a day for the person. You have to provide housekeeping materials. When doctor was doing my second swab, he didn't change his glove. You know what he did? He swabbed it with alcohol. So imagine you are doing swabs for COVID-19, and because of limited resources, you have to swab your glove. That would not be acceptable anywhere.
So
Yeah.
the system of state quarantine might actually be open up to potential infection.
Well, absolutely. The whole process from the time you disembark from the plane and you are herded onto a bus,
Yeah.
right? And you have to sit there for 2 hours, absolutely hot. And in my case, in the case of the flight of October 19th, we went to Canada Hall, which I don't know if you look at the website, you will see it's single beds with communal washrooms.
Right.
Now tell me, if you're trying to prevent infection, how are you going to do that? So as I said numerous times, I was painfully aware that this was a high-risk situation for me. And I had made up my mind. If one person was positive, we were all going to be positive.
But do you
Fortunately, my second swab is negative.
But do you see, I mean, it's one thing to say those things, but do you think that there was some viable alternative that the government could have adopted?
Should they have adopted you to stay home, or?
Absolutely. So the alternative would be this. Since you are allowing asymptomatic COVID positive patients to quarantine at home, anyone who is boarding an aircraft has to be well. You cannot have shortness of breath and chest pain. You are screened with a questionnaire and your temperature is taken. So by definition, for you to board an aircraft, you have to be well. When you get to the airport, that 2-hour wait there, why not allow the medical professionals to swab you at the airport? And then for those of us who are able to quarantine at home, you send us home. There will be a group where, they live with family and they're unable to.
In close quarters.
And those go to state quarantine.
Yeah.
So it's very simple.
just wanted to get your take generally on the regulations that are in place in the country, the complete shutdown of bars, the complete shutdown of other businesses. Do you think that this far into the pandemic that these measures are still justifiable? What are your views on that as a medical doctor?
Well, I mean, there are two schools of thought. Right now, people are concerned about the impact on mental and psychological health.
Yeah.
We have to live with this virus. We have never created a vaccine that's 100% sensitive. So, you know, when you promote, oh, we're going to get a vaccine soon, and it's going to be the end all, it's going to be the game changer, we have to take that with a pinch of salt.
Right.
So my view is you've got to balance it. You've got to put things in place, and you've got to learn to live with this virus.
Right.
But I'm glad you brought up that point, because as a returning national, one of the things I always felt is that as a group, we were singled out. And, you know, it was quite disheartening to hear people say, well, you know how Trinidadians just behave.
Right.
Right? So we have to persist with the state quarantine because, you know, Trinidadians.
Right.
Well, I want to point out something to all these critics. What is the difference between a returning national and a resident national? Are our behaviors different?
Right.
I mean, why is it that the numbers, right, from August onwards were so high in Trinidad and Tobago?
While
was
the borders
it
were
the
closed?
returning nationals
Yeah.
or the resident nationals?
Well, clearly, it was not because of the returning nationals.
Correct.
Our borders were closed and we wasn't letting anyone.
And you know, my personal belief is at 8 months and more, with the information we have about COVID-19, people make choices about their behaviors. They decide whether they wear a mask, whether they social distance, whether they have a party with 40 people. And this is not, you know, something that's peculiar to Trinidad and Tobago. It's happening all over the world. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not going to blame the government if someone decides they're not wearing a mask. People now are making their own choices.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Fully understood. So that there has to be, we have to leave it within the autonomy of the person to decide
Yes.
whether or not they are going to take the measures
And do what is right.
and do what is required.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
And the other thing, you know, that's been disheartening is the use of statistics, right, to frighten the resident nationals about the potential risk we pose. So for the first time last weekend, we heard the CMO presenting the data that 11% of a flight, 11% of returning nationals of the previous week tested positive, right? Prior to that, we had never heard how many returning nationals tested positive.
right.
And so they were using that as the
Justification.
reason why they needed to continue this particular policy.
Yeah.
But I want to show you something. The Minister of National Security said that from the 31st of August to the 22nd of October, 2,573 people were repatriated.
Right.
If we take 11% of those as being infected, which I doubt very much, so that's 283 people.
Right.
Between 31st of August to 22nd of October, that same period, Trinidad and Tobago registered 3,687 infections.
Correct. Yeah.
So tell me, I mean, how do you account for the remainder if returning nationals account for 11%?
Correct.
You know, as a physician, there's a book called How to Lie with Statistics. I could swing a statistic to suit myself, to suit my policy.
Yeah.
We are supposed to use the data to formulate policy,
Not to justify.
not
Yeah.
right, not
Yeah.
to justify, you know,
Because they're using
a
it as a
policy
justification
that's not
to
working.
keep our citizens abroad.
Yeah. Well, Doc, we've been with you some time. You have any last words that you'd like to say?
Specifically to our nationals away, and then specifically to the administration.
Well, I think I've said a lot to the administration already.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I've said a lot to the administration. So I'll skip that if you don't mind. But
Sure,
I
that's
want
fine.
to say to our returning nationals, you know, there are a group of us. We're going to keep fighting. We're going to, until the last one of us is home. If you want to come to your home, it is your right. And not because, you know, we are comfortable back in Trinidad and Tobago. We should not ignore the rights of our nationals who are stranded and suffering. And so I want to thank you all tremendously. You know, mainstream media, I have to say, has been very disappointing with repatriation. They ask questions that are totally unrelated.
Yeah.
They should do their research. And in fact, if they don't know what to do, I am always willing to help.
Well, that's why you're on.
That's why, yeah,
That's why
exactly.
we brought you on.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you very much,
Well,
Doctor.
thank you very much. Thank
And keep
you.
up this struggle. We are, Stefan and I are now soldiers in your struggle, so that we are going to assist wherever we can and however we can.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, Kyle, I'm not sure if you remember, well, last week we had a young lady on, Soraya
Yeah.
Kadir. Just as an update, unfortunately, her dad passed away,
Yeah.
Nizaboon Kadir. And she was not, of course, able to come and attend his funeral.
Yeah.
It is when I saw the message, it was, I got emotional. It was heart-wrenching.
That's the other part that we miss, and that's why we're trying on this program to highlight the human face. But first of all, condolences to Soraya and her family.
Yeah.
People are missing those precious moments in their lives when their families and friends are abroad.
Yeah.
I mean, a funeral or even getting the opportunity to say goodbye to that person that you love could never be, you could never receive compensation for that. I know of one family today who had to do an online wedding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see their daughter married, and they're not able to be there. So that it is a heart-wrenching issue. It's an issue that the government needs to address much more promptly. I mean, we've heard the views of one doctor who has said, look, she's not satisfied with the policy that the government has implemented, and she's not satisfied that they're using the data correctly to inform their policy.
Correct. What was a little bit heart-wrenching for me is that he indicated that he was so happy that we gave her an opportunity to have her plight.
I mean,
it was heart-wrenching to hear that, because when you're not able to attend, I mean, this is her dad we're talking about it. And it was just last week. I know her dad was tuned in, and he was
looking at the
listening.
program, and
he wasn't able to see his daughter for 8 months. Soraya, I apologize, condolences. Hopefully we will continue, as Kyle said to the doctor.
And hopefully you'll be back home
correct.
soon to be with your family in this trouble.
Yeah, and we will continue the fight. We will continue to give anyone the opportunity to come and air their concerns in relation to this issue.
And tell us your story. Tell us
your story.
Yeah.
Right. We'll take a very short break, and we're going to come back with the deposition with Mr. Singh and Ms. Rambajan.